Welcome in, everybody, to the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Beyond the Darkness for a Sunday. I'm Tim Dennison for Dave Schrader. Excited about today's show, and we're going to get rolling right away here with Theresa Cheung, who has a master's from King's College, Cambridge, has spent the last 20 years writing best-selling books and encyclopedias about the psychic world. Today, we're going to take the psychic, and we're going to combine it with science. And I know a lot of people out there in our listening audience tend to say, okay, where's the science in this? And they tend to want science. And although you guys say we want science, and then sometimes you nod off a little bit, we're going to make this a little interesting today with our guest, Theresa Cheung. Two of her paranormal titles reached the Sunday Times Top 10, and her international bestseller, The Dream Dictionary, regularly bounces to number one on the Amazon Dreams bestseller chart. Today, Theresa is going to discuss her newest book. It's called The Premonition Code, and I think you guys are going to find this really interesting, because we're going to talk the science of precognition, which is previously hidden in academic journals, revealed for the general reader with a spiritual perspective and true life reader stories. Now, Theresa's been writing books about psychic abilities and the paranormal and constantly been asked, where is the proof or the science? Now, her new book aims to present some of the science out there for the general reader. It also aims to replace the unclaimed Randy $1 Million Challenge. We'll talk about that as well as the website that accompanies this book, which is thepremonitioncode.com, is a global scientific experiment that you can participate in into the reality of precognition. Now, if you read the book and complete the quizzes and exercises, you become part of that scientific research. So we'll bring in now Theresa Cheung to Beyond the Darkness. Hi, Theresa. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. And thank you for that wonderful introduction. And I'm very happy to be here.
Now, you've been at this quite a while, writing these different books. And I don't want to misquote how long you've been doing this, but this has been a passion for quite a while, writing about the psychic world. Am I correct?
Yeah, a good 20 years or so. I'm a bit of a serial writer. I've written book after book about a subject that I'm passionate about, the paranormal, all aspects of it, really.
Okay, Theresa, so here's the deal. Our audience may be a little confused right off the bat, because we're talking about the Precognition Code, which is the book that we're talking about here today, but you also have intuition. Mm-hmm. And on our show, we deal a lot with intuition. And I think we do deal with precognition, too, from a psychic standpoint. But tell us the difference a little bit here between precognition and intuition and how they differ.
We actually cover that in the book, actually, the difference between premonitions, precognition and intuition, because a lot of people are confused, and other terms I could bring in here, like sixth sense, clairvoyance, gut instinct, having a hunch. What is the difference? Mm-hmm. And as we explain in the book, the difference is so very subtle that actually in scientific circles, precognition has now become a kind of a catch-all term, almost like ESP is a term for all psychic phenomena. So the difference is so subtle that we actually in the book say very early on that we're going to use that as a term, precognition, as a catch-all to include all these other expressions of it. But however, if you wanted to say a difference, intuition is a kind of a feeling that something might happen. And there was a wonderful book about it I highly recommend. Blink, it was called, I think, by Malcolm Gladwell. Okay. That is a kind of a feeling that something's going to happen. Now, precognition is an actual glimpse of a future, typically in your mind's eye. And what we like to call it in scientific circles is a very specific, sort of specialized form of intuition. So it's kind of like intuition plus one, a kind of advanced intuition, if you like. Okay. I hope that explains it as best I can. It's explained at length in the book as well.
Okay. Key me in a little bit on this then. If you have a premonition, is a premonition purely psychic? Is it something, or is it something that could be hardwired? And I'll clarify on this. let's say, and I'll use the example of an animal, like a deer out in the woods. You know, a deer hears a noise, and it has an instinct. The instinct is fight or flight. And a lot of us believe that fight or flight instinct is built in. It's a mechanism.
In our DNA, survival, yes.
Right, yeah, that it's not necessarily intuitive or that it's a gift given to us from a creature or a being beyond, that it's a gift or a power that it is very much hardwired into our DNA.
Yes.
Would you say that premonition is something that's more hardwired into our DNA, or is it truly something that's a psychic gift?
I would think it's actually something that is within all of us and hardwired in our DNA, but the way the world has gone, because we got so materialistic, we now rely so much on technology, that we have not developed it as we could. And it's got lazy. It's like a muscle. If you don't use a muscle, it's just going to get weaker and weaker and weaker. And that's what this book is about, the Premonition Code, is we're trying to get you to flex that muscle again, because I do believe it's in all of us, and it's the people, and it requires practice, daily practice, and there are certain exercises in the book what we talk you through that to improve your precognitive ability to glimpse a future.
Let me ask you this, because it seems like you mentioned those different areas of psychic phenomena, and I'll use the word minutia here when it comes to premonitions. What made you interested in this minutia of psychic phenomena and made you want to go out and figure out the scientific side of this? What was your
Yeah, it started, well, as I said in the introduction, I have been writing about the paranormal, the psychic world for many, many years. And I've always just kind of accepted that it's a matter of belief and personal experience. And I've never rammed it down anyone's throat saying, it's real. If you either believe it or you don't. I happen to stand in the camp of people who believe that there are mysterious things about ourselves and this world that we can't explain. And that's what I write about, and psychic powers and psychic development. However, a few years ago, I think around 2015, for the first time, I decided to go on social media. I'd been very reluctant up until then because I'm a bit of a neophyte, and I'm just a writer. I study and I research and I write books. And I went on social media, and I was not prepared for the avalanche of criticism from skeptics. Also, there was a massive amount of positive people coming on with positive comments online, and that was very gratifying because I'd been writing around so many years, and a lot of people had a Theresa Cheung book about the psychic world or psychic abilities. But the criticism I constantly got was, where is the science? Where's your proof? James Randi put up $1 million and nobody's ever claimed it, etc. They're frauds, and they'd be sending me case histories of a psychic who'd been a fraud or whatever. And I thought, I want to try and do something because I have seen enough to convince me, and I've had direct personal experience. But that has convinced me. But of course, if somebody else hasn't experienced something psychic or doesn't believe, what can I present to them? Because and I thought, I'm going to find out where science is at. Now, 10 years ago, I wrote an Element Encyclopedia of the Psychic World for HarperCollins. And when I did it 10 years ago, there really wasn't that much science. So again, I just thought I'm going to go down the anecdotal route. I did true life stories. I did traditions and anecdote. It was all anecdotal. But 10 years on, I found there has been an explosion of scientific research into paranormal abilities, and I found that absolutely fascinating. And so I went to the heart of that, where I think is leading the world at the moment, which is the Institute of Noetic Sciences, which is led by Dr. Dean Radin, and also someone working there is Dr. Julia Mossbridge, who is the Precognition lady, and a fine about 8 scientists there. And I approached them and I said, look, I write about what you study, but I write from an anecdotal perspective. Is there any way on my page, because my page was getting very popular at the time, it was there were a lot of interest in it, that for a week, each of you scientists could do a 2-minute video explaining your research into the paranormal and what you were finding. And they agreed. I was really surprised. They were wonderful. This was all new to them, and they agreed. And then I put a kind of a call out on my social media and said, like in the Matrix, do you want the blue pill or the red pill? Do you want to know the truth? Do you want to know the science of the paranormal? And the response was astonishing. I did a post one night and I woke up the next morning, like 17,000 likes. It was incredible. And then the whole week, a scientist talked every night on my page, and the reaction was amazing because they were so credible. And they were saying, look, we are scientists. We study this objectively. And in any other line of any other area of life, now, all this anecdotal evidence that you collate in your books, because a lot of my books are true life stories of people with psychic abilities or whatever, would be studied scientifically, and that's what we're doing. And we can say, here's our research, and they showed a lot of their research, and we can say that in the overwhelming majority of cases, what is happening far outweighs chance. And don't accuse us of trying to be biased or whatever, because we are scientists before are believers. We want to present the objective evidence. I found that so fascinating. And then I went to work I went to collaborate with another institute in America, Windbridge Institute, with Dr. Julia Mossbridge, who is doing scientific research of mediums, and incredible results she is producing. And these mediums are not doing it for any money. They're doing it anonymously. And she is researching them again from a scientific basis. And her research is starting to create a bit of excitement within the scientific community. On top of that, you've got Dr. Sampar Nia, who is researching near-death experiences and coming up with astonishing results as well, and that's made the mainstream press. So put all this together, it's fascinating, and I wanted to do something, so I spoke to IONS, and especially Dr. Julia Mossbridge, because one of my most best-selling books is about dreams, and she's the dream expert there. They have a huge dream database. And she also studies time and precognition. And it just suddenly hit me. I thought, we've got to collaborate on something. And let's try this was Dr. Julia Mossbridge's idea, to replace the Randy Challenge with a scientifically controlled experiment online. And let's see what happens when we get our readers to work through the exercises to see if we can find any scientifically validated precognitives. So we're hoping one day, it's totally free of charge, the website that we've set up, that we can actually conduct a global experiment, scientific experiment into the reality of precognition. Because James Randi is an amazing guy. I actually love what he was doing. But my issue with him is that he was not a scientist. And I do believe that scientists need to be studying this. And I hope in the Premonition Code that what we're doing is starting to break new ground. And I do hope that this book does break new ground in trying to get more credibility to a very, very misunderstood subject area. And sorry, I've spoken so much, but I'm so passionate about it.
Oh, no, absolutely.
I hope it's made sense.
And absolutely. And more importantly, I guess going to the point before I kind of backtrack here on you, more importantly, and Dave and I have interviewed James Randi a couple of times in our history.
He's brilliant, isn't he? He's really interesting.
Very brilliant and very smart. And for believers out there who kind of poo-poo on James Randi, they shouldn't. He was a very
He's a truth seeker. I completely admire. I think we're very similar. Truth seeker. He is seeking the truth. He's not saying psychic abilities aren't real. He's just saying, show me something that convinces me. Because sadly, in this area, and I've seen it myself, there are a lot of frauds because it's totally unregulated. And that's the problem. Anyone can say, I'm a crystal healer. I'm an energy healer. I'm a medium. Right. There aren't enough controls. And that is what I'm trying to put into place. The Premonition Code will be a way that the very few people who pass the scientifically controlled testing, at the end will get a certificate saying they're scientifically validated. We expect there to be very few. At Windbridge Institute as well, the dream of the Windbridge Institute, Dr. Julia Mossbridge there, is to have scientifically validated mediums working alongside grief counsellors. But I have seen the healing that a very good medium can bring to people who are grieving. And I think if you could actually have some kind of scientific control in this, it would revolutionize this area and stop all these accusations of fraud I mean, it's a bit of a utopian dream I'm having. It's very futuristic, but
I do have to ask you this. I got to stop you right here, Theresa, and ask you this. Do you not believe, as someone who is trying to come at it from science, that part of what a medium is doing there is psychological, even without the gift?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And actually, the best mediums that I've seen are ones who are incredibly wise, very spiritual, and really are bringing a powerful message, spiritual message of eternal love and eternal life. Because what a medium is trying to do is reassure the person who is grieving that the essence of that person somewhere exists on. And we've all lost loved ones, and whether you believe or not, there's a part of that person who's departed that still is alive within you and around you. It's I mean, that's the basis of Christianity, isn't it? I mean, Christ died on the cross, and he resurrected. You know, Christians believe in the eternal life, like that. Right. In a way, that's what a spiritual medium is trying to say, that when someone dies, in a way, you can enter into a new spiritual relationship with them that is eternal and more powerful and stronger than ever before, because they're forever with you. But I have also been to demonstrations where the medium has picked up details that they could not possibly know. And I found that fascinating. In the book I wrote before the Premonition Code, Answers from Heaven, which is doing so well, and the Daily Mail actually picked up on it and did a big feature on it. I teamed up there because another accusation I got as Where's the Science was that all these people are frauds. So I kind of went on a search around the country of finding someone who I could believe in, who wasn't doing it for the money, who seemed to be genuine. And I think I found someone who had been working quietly in spiritualist churches for 20 years without any fanfare. And I went to some of her services where there's no money. She does it because it's a vocation. And also, as more I found out about her, she'd previously had a very successful career, I think, in Leo Burnett. She was happily married. There was absolutely no reason why every Sunday she felt called to give messages from the other side. So I went up to her and I said, "What's going on?" And she said, "I don't know. To be honest, I wish they'd go away." And whenever I talk like that, people think that I'm I need to be carted away in a straitjacket. And you can imagine when I was working in Leo Burnett and Walt Disney, where she was working as well, I just don't want to talk about it. But she was so normal and lovely children, lovely family, had no reason to do it. And I thought, yeah, that's the kind of medium I'm interested in, not the ones that stand up on a stage and do it as a profession, right? Because there's too much potential then. Imagine you've got a stadium of 1,000 people wanting messages. You're going to use cold reading. You're going to. Oh, sure. You can't. I was interested in and that's what the Windbridge Institute studies as well. Mediums who are quietly working under the radar, and they do it because it is their vocation. And the more I found out about this medium, she's called Claire Broad. I do urge anyone to check her out. She's absolutely brilliant. From the age of 3, she was seeing dead people or hearing messages that she would relay to other people, and they'd turn around and think, "How did you know that?" And this was a child. And that she's not alone. There are other people like that. And I'm telling you, the best mediums and psychics aren't the ones who typically go on to write best-selling books or do media tours. And they're the ones I'm interested in researching scientifically, because I'd like to see what's happening with their brainwaves, what's going on. Sorry, I've gone on a tangent.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
That was another thing. So the science, and to find what I call the real deal. To go to a demonstration and to see a medium who I know is coming to a town where they have no idea where anyone is, and then to suddenly say something like, "You're adopted, aren't you? Because your adopted mother's here." And I could see the woman just have. And then to someone else, "You have 3 sons, and I've got somebody coming through and getting the names right." And I'm thinking, well, there's either this is communication with the afterlife or it's telepathy. And for me, both are fascinating because they suggest supernormal powers of the human mind, which I think is worth investigating.
Absolutely. Let's do this. Let's take a quick break here. And when we come back, I want to ask you a little bit about what it was like for ions to come in and try to, because there's a bit of a disconnect at times between the regular audience of the paranormal in science. And I want to address that in this book and putting this book together, because sometimes people who are fans of the paranormal want science, but they don't want to sit through it. So
exactly, they get bored.
Right.
Yep.
So when we come back, let's talk a little bit about that. Our guest is Theresa Cheung. She is the author of the Premonition Code, The Science of Precognition, How Sensing the Future Can Change Your Life. And when we come back, we'll talk about that little bit of a scientific disconnect, as it were, when it comes to the paranormal. And then we'll do that in just a moment here on the Best in Paranormal Talk Radio, Beyond the Darkness. But first, all right, welcome back to the Best in Paranormal Talk Radio. This is Beyond the Darkness. I'm Tim Dennison for Dave Schrader. Our guest is Theresa Cheung, the author of the Premonition Code, The Science of Precognition, How Sensing the Future Can Change Your Life. And Theresa's joined forces with cognitive neuroscience scientist Julia Mossbridge, PhD and the director of the Innovation Lab at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, otherwise known as IONS. And putting together the Premonition Code here, Theresa, we were talking a little bit earlier about how the scientists from IONS got together and they put together these 2-minute videos for your page to explain to people the science, because people were asking, where's the science behind what it is you're trying to explain? You know, you can explain premonitions and intuitions all you want, or any type of psychic phenomenon all you want, but where's the science behind it? And the good folks at IONS were nice enough to sit down and cut the videos to explain the science behind it. But I notice here on this show, and a lot of my colleagues on their shows notice, that the minute you start to talk science, the glaze starts to happen over the eyeballs. And the minute you really start to get into it and you want to start talking science, people go, okay, I can take it for so long, and then I'm tapping out. You know, it's like 10th grade science class all over again. How is it that you can... And how is it that Dr. Mossbridge... There was a reason I
asked them to keep their videos to 2 minutes.
Right. How is it that you and Dr. Mossbridge kept people in this, you know?
Well, I was very lucky. Dr. Julia Mossbridge, she's actually a bit of a natural on YouTube. I'd seen some of her videos before. She is able to make science. She has the gift of making science sound very simple. Some of the others I did have to sort of say, please, can you use non-technical, because people don't understand, sometimes even quantum theory needs explained, or double bind experiment, and what all these terms are and why they're doing it, and meta-analysis and all that. I mean, it's really tough. And I have found when I've given talks about this that I'm enthusiastic about the science, because I think it's the future of the paranormal, making it more mainstream. But you're right. Most people think is, how does this make me feel better? And that was a challenge in this book, to try and present it in a way that it's comforting as well, and it's empowering, and it's not just academic terminology. And I have struggled with that. And I think also the book as well, it does confuse people, because my readers are used to me writing in a certain way, which is real life stories, personal insights and self-help tips, that kind of thing. Whereas Dr. Julia, I mean, her last book, get this, was Transcendent Mind, and it was published by the American Psychological Association. In fact, it broke new ground, because it was the first book, it caused a lot of controversy, to be published by the American Psychological Association about transcendent states and psychic ability. It's very academic and expensive, but it's a brilliant read if you're looking at where the science really is at. And Dr. Julia Mossbridge has broken new ground in that. But it is difficult to make the science not entertaining, but sort of relevant to, well, how can this help me right here, right now? What I'm trying to show is that science and spirit, the gap is closing in fast. Most of us think that they're opposite, that one's heads and one's tails. They're not. Right. They're actually slowly coming together. And I think, actually, and this is controversial, but I think one of the reasons that science is now studying paranormal experiences, psychic experiences, and the inner world, because that's what noetic means. It means the inner world, our feelings, what are feelings and all that. It's because there are more women in science. And I think the more and more women in science, the more the internal state is going to be studied, and what can't be seen and what is invisible, than the external. Because in the past, when it was chiefly male, I think it was external results, solid hard proof. But I think we're going to see a shift in the years ahead in more study of the noetic states. Noetic, I mean, I don't know if you know about the formation of the term noetic. It was a famous astronaut, I can't remember his name, but he founded ions because he had a transcendent out-of-body experience in space.
Really?
When he was back from his last mission. And he thought, I've got to study what happened there. Something extraordinary happened to me. And he founded IONS, I think, in the 1970s, to research these transcendent experiences when you kind of go out of body, where it's spiritual, it's outside of your physical experience.
Very interesting. Well, let me ask you this, Theresa. It seems to me, too, and maybe I'm just getting a bit metaphorical here, but could it be, too, that we're studying this inside experience because slowly but surely, it's just my look at society, are we losing touch with ourselves, and maybe that's why we're...
Oh, gosh, I see it in young people today. We are spending so much time focusing on what really, truly doesn't matter. Appearance, materialism. I know that's a necessary phase for us all we have stages of evolution in life, and it is important for us to go through the material and all that. Mm-hmm. But it's so sad that the spiritual, the eternal part of us, that is so neglected. For children as well, I think spirituality should be the first, not the last thing we turn to. People tend to only turn to the spiritual. What is the meaning of my life? Why am I here? Usually when there's a great crisis or tragedy or bereavement. Bereavement is a great spiritual catalyst because you want to understand meaning, and all the old things, relationships, career, materialism, none of that can adequately help you understand. But the spiritual perspective it can, and I say that's what my passion is, to try and get spiritualism, and I put spiritualism and the paranormal in the same category, something that we consider first rather than last.
I guess the reason I would suggest that, and I'll throw the scenarios out here, is younger people use the term woke, but you could also say it's a sense of a loss of innocence, or you could say that it's shunning off blind faith. It's consciously wanting to know more about the world, the universe, your surroundings, yes, but at the same time not wanting to hold on to what's looked at as blind faith. Wanting to hold on to ideals that your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents had before you.
And that is something we all have to go through. And I think a lot of us have to get through the religion hurdle as well. I mean, I've got nothing against religion if it brings people meaning and harms no one. Religion is, for me, is a path to eternity, to heaven. But for the increasing numbers of people now, religion is such a turn-off. And not being able to turn to religion when times are hard, where do you turn? So people turn to the internet, their peers, or materialism, or whatever, and that's where the danger is. And spiritualism without religion is something that I think should be taught and encouraged. And interestingly, over here in the UK, our NHS, our National Health Service, they have broke new ground because they, for the first time, hired atheist chaplains and non-religious chaplains, spiritual, which I think, because, obviously in a hospital setting, mm-hmm, you're distraught. And in times past, they'd call in the priest or whatever. Mm-hmm. But a lot of people don't want that anymore, but they still want that spiritual sense. And I think that's an amazing, that is, for me, is very exciting. But it was earlier this year that they started to appoint them, so that people can, and they're being more requested than the actual ones for religions.
That's interesting. I guess with that though, I guess the question I have for you is, with that blind faith though, weren't we flexing that muscle that would have brought about intuition and premonition, even if it was subconsciously? Weren't we continually flexing that muscle?
Faith can be a trigger. It can, and when you believe in something eternal, because that's what each religion offers in various different ways. It's a path to eternal life, and that your life has meaning. And if you believe in that, and we do say this in the book as well, if you have that kind of belief that there is more to you than your physical body, you are more likely to be precognitive. Yes. Studies have shown that if people believe that precognition is possible, that they're more likely to show intuitive and precognitive abilities than people who don't have this faith in something other than the material.
And it seems to me that as we continue on through the years, that as people are becoming more woke or losing their blind faith, that people are wandering around a little lost and are seeking that hard science, but not getting the answer through hard science, which is interesting that you're bringing this together now.
Trying to, it is trying to bring science. I mean, it is difficult because, as I said, they're two very different audiences, and of course, we will get a lot of criticism from the scientists saying it's all woo or whatever. But I'm trying to present in the book experiments and hardcore science to show that there is something there. And the research that Dr. Julia Mossbridge has pioneered as well into presentiment, which is sensing something before it happens, has been very well received. She's onto something, which is incredibly exciting. And the fact that there are so many scientists like her now, if you type in precognition into scientific journals, it comes up a lot now, whereas in 10 years or 15 years ago would hardly come up at all. So science is finding this fascinating. And as I said, even the US military has spent millions of dollars, I won't say pounds, dollars, researching super intuition, because they believe that if elite soldiers can be trained to be more intuitive, it can save lives, sensing the future, what might happen. And they call it spidey sense, and that's something else in the book that I find very fascinating.
Well, let's talk about that for a moment, because we've talked before about remote viewing and precognitive. I guess that you wouldn't call that quite precognitive. That would be more of a psychic ability, but precognition.
Well, remote viewing is like, again, with like intuition. I mean, precognition and remote viewing are almost similar. Really, they are. They're just slightly different scientific expression of it, but precognition, remote viewing, for me, are very much the same.
Yeah. Now, would they be, or are they slight cousins of each other? Because I can see where let's take a military situation, for example.
Yes.
A soldier who's dropped in the middle of a desert looking for an enemy, an opponent. And he's looking precognitively or trying to feel out where that opponent may be, as opposed to having a team of remote viewers who could tell him where they are or where that enemy is. Is there a difference, or is that just a subtle argument that I'm making amongst myself?
I think it's more of a subtle argument for me. I mean, there would be people who would differ with me, and Dr. Julia has some series on this. But for me, as I said, I'm not a scientist, so I can't really. For me, I just think of precognition as an umbrella term for all these abilities, really, same as deja vu, intuition, all those things. And the website that we're set up at www.thepremonitioncode.com, you'll see that our experiments are very similar to the testing that we offer is very similar to remote viewing.
Okay. And again, so that's the premonitioncode.com. Is that what you said?
www.thepremonitioncode.com, yes.
Okay. So we encourage people to go there, to check it out, to take the test and participate and be a part of science. I tell you what, Theresa, let's take a break right here. And it's time now for our regular weekly feature. of Theater of the Mind. And in today's episode, we have a lady who's come along and is telling us her own experiences with the paranormal and from a different slant this week. So here it is, this week's episode of Theater of the Mind.
This is the real-life experiences of Brandy and her family living on unholy ground. My story begins when I was 8 years old. My family had just moved into a new house that was surrounded by forest, except for maybe a 2-acre clearing where the house sat. I was having fun exploring the new trails through the woods with a friend when we were stopped, dead in our tracks. In front of us stood a man, wearing a farmer-style hat and chopping wood with an axe. The axe was raised overhead as though ready to come down on a piece of wood. The only thing that was off about the man was that he was a perfect silhouette. Perfectly, clearly outlined in the shape of a man. But no details could be seen, and he was absolutely black. We were both so sure of what we had seen that we ran inside to find my mother and retell the story. She believed us so much that she came outside to speak with the man, seeing as how it was probably a new neighbor. When we arrived at the location of the sighting, there was no one to be found. More than that, there was no evidence of wood splitting. I am sure my mother thought that our imaginations were simply running wild. However, I know what I saw. After a few months of living in the new house, we finally settled into new routines. A part of what us kids were expected to oversee was taking out the trash from the house and placing it in the garbage cans that were in a small cleared nook in the woods that was not far from the house. My older brother and I had put off the chore until the evening, and at that point, it was dark outside. We each grabbed a bag and proceeded to the trash cans. As I threw my bag into the trash cans, I happened to glance straight into the woods. My glance was met with a pair of eyes about 10 feet away. All instinct in me thought it was some sort of large dog-like creature, maybe even a wolf. I was instantly hit with fear. But, in the interest of not looking like a baby and having to hear my brother make fun of me for the days to come, I swallowed every emotion I was feeling at that point in time and decided to try my best to play it cool. I turned and began to walk away, back toward the house. I noticed my brother walking faster than me, so I quickened my pace to keep up. The next thing I realized was we were in a full sprint back to the house. Once we were inside, we slammed the door behind us. My brother looked me in the eyes and asked me a question I will never forget. "Did you see that?" We discussed the incident with our parents, but came to no real conclusion. Even as an adult now, thinking back, none of the facts make sense. It was a predator dog-like animal. The eyes were too tall to be a fox or a coyote, and there were no other dogs in the area. I maybe could have dismissed this incident if it hadn't occurred to me again. Years later, a friend and I decided to have a campout in the woods. We were staying in a tent. At some point in the night, we decided it would be a good idea to go into the house to grab some extra snacks. When we returned to the tent, we felt something was off. We were hurrying to get our shoes off before entering the tent, and that's when I noticed the eyes again. I leapt into the tent, and my friend hurriedly tried to zip up the tent door, as if that would somehow prove any level of protection. The zipper jammed, and we just held the door shut with our hands. After some time, we felt safe enough to peer outside, and the eyes had vanished. We can't explain what we saw, nor can we explain why we felt the fight or flight instinct in us rise. This situation passed by us completely unexplained. Some more time passed, and I had moved out. I lived far enough away that Skype was pretty much my main source of communication with my mom. She called me one day saying something along the lines of, "I haven't been sleeping well. I keep waking up at 4:44 a.m. It's so hard to fall back asleep." I told her it's probably nothing and it will pass. A week later, we were talking, and she says she is still waking up at 4:44 a.m. And now, it has become really creepy because she looks at the clock and sees 4:44 p.m. at work every day. And while at the grocery store, her total was $4.44. I told her that it was probably nothing, that you are just noticing the numbers because you have started to take notice of them. But hey, in the end, what do I know? It could mean something. Try to think of what is happening around that time, and try to think of who could possibly be trying to get your attention. Nothing came of that until 3 weeks later. My mom called me and immediately started the conversation with, "You are not going to believe what happened." She had a half day of work the day before. After completing some household tasks, she decided she would take a nap. During her nap, the phone rang. She thought nothing of it. Her husband usually calls around that time, so she decided to ignore it and continue napping. Life goes on as usual until that evening, when she notices the house phone blinking and remembers she had a phone call from earlier. She looked at the recent calls and immediately noticed something very peculiar. Displayed across the caller ID screen is the house phone number, which has never happened before. As odd as that was, she looked at the timestamp and noticed when the call was made, 4:44 p.m. Something had made the house phone call itself at 4:44. My mother at that point was convinced something was trying very hard to get her attention, but she was still unsure of who or what. After that incident, my mother began noticing 4:44 everywhere she turned. Now, there is the theory that our brains notice patterns and are more consciously aware of them. And I do believe that what my mother was experiencing was probably some of that. But I can't fully rule out that there was something paranormal going on as well, especially because she told me of an experience she had while hunting a year later. My mother was sitting in her deer blind on the same property as the house. Anyone who has been hunting would know of the calm the woods have early in the morning. Everything is peaceful. You become ultra aware of your surroundings, listening in for even the faintest of footsteps. This is the closest my mother has ever come to meditating. As she sat in the blind, simply being aware, she checked her clock. Yep, the time was 4:44 a.m. However, this time it was different. There had been countless times before that she noticed 4:44, but this time it finally came to her and she had a knowing. Goosebumps raised on her arms and she became overwhelmed with emotion. 444 symbolized 3 very close women to my mother: her grandmother, mother, and cousin. And in that moment, she knew they had in fact safely found each other on the other side, and they were there to look out for her. When my mother told me of this story, I was hit with a thought that I hadn't had before. What does 444 mean in numerology? Sure enough, 444 means that guardian angels are looking after you. We were shocked. It was such a comforting thought to have close loved ones looking after her that we forgot to ask the bigger question. From what? My husband and I decided it was time to move closer to home now that we had our first son and our second was on the way. Because of the distance we were traveling, we decided it was best if we lived with my mother and stepdad until we could get our feet on the ground. The move was taxing enough, not to mention that this pregnancy was not the easiest on me. As time progressed and we remained in the house, I started to feel something was off. I started to see things in my vision, which happens to be a very big indicator of preeclampsia and a very serious medical condition. I let this occur for a few days to really make sure this was happening, because it didn't make sense to me. I wasn't having any other symptoms, nor was I really a typical candidate for it. Finally, I sat my husband down at the table and told him I think preeclampsia is an issue and I need to see a doctor right away. He asked me why I believed this was a possibility. I said it was because I was seeing things. His face turned to shock. He leaned forward in his chair, looked me dead in the eyes, and said, "Are you seeing the black birds flying across the window too?" That was, in fact, exactly what I was seeing. None of this made sense. Black birds leave during the winter. They don't flock at my mother's house, and most importantly, one of the windows has a roof overhang, and no birds could fly by that window without also flying directly into the overhang. We moved out of that house 2 weeks later, and I never saw anything that wasn't there for the rest of my pregnancy. After all the things that have happened to me at that house, and hearing all the experiences of other people, I have come to the conclusion that there is something dark going on at that property. I think that it is such a threat to my mother's spirit that she needs the guardian angels there to look over her soul.
Beyond the darkness.
Welcome back to the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Beyond the Darkness. I'm Tim Dennis in for Dave Schrader. Dave will be off again, I believe, next weekend as he's headed off to Romania. So we'll have a brand new episode of Supernatural News and Parashare on Saturday. And we'll, of course, have a brand new guest for you next Sunday as well. And I'll be taking over the reins there. And, of course, Tim Weisberg will be taking over on Midnight in the Desert next weekend. Actually next week, as I have my sister's wedding, and then I believe that weekend following, it's the week of the 17th. I'll be filling in on Midnight in the Desert. So there you go. Look for that, midnightinthedesert.com, and I'll be taking over that full week there as Dave's in Romania the week of the 17th. So lots of stuff going on this side, on my side here on Beyond the Darkness and Midnight in the Desert. Our guest is Theresa Cheung. The book is The Premonition Code, The Science of Precognition, How Sensing the Future Can Change Your Life. And Theresa, it's available at Amazon.com. I know that. Where
and
else?
Barnes & Noble, I think.
And Barnes & Noble, all right. That's where people can pick up the book. And
can I just jump in? Because I was thinking actually at the break about remote viewing. Mm-hmm. Of course, a difference I didn't pick up on is remote viewing. Typically, you're viewing a target that is happening in the present. And to be strictly precognition is sensing the future, something that hasn't happened yet.
Oh, okay.
So that's a difference I needed to just stress. It just suddenly struck me.
Okay, sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's like I said, there's some minutia in there that I may or may not.
Remote viewing is what of course used for police work, and investigation. I mean, that's something I found out when I was doing the book as well. Is that we don't hear about it, but the police do not rely, but use psychics and precognitives and remote viewers. It does still happen. I find that fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely, I do too. And of course, there have been movies and whatnot about about remote viewing and that are fascinating as well. And even if you read the books about what the American military has done with remote viewing, it's enough to make your head spin.
Well, Ed May, actually, who wrote the definitive book about the remote viewing program, Stargate, there's an extract from him in the book. He's in our book as well, talking about it with Dr. Julia. He met her for lunch. Well, they do work together anyway. They're good friends. So we were getting all these perspectives from all these top experts in the field. I feel very blessed. But, of course, on my own, I couldn't have done it because, they'd look at me as if, you're, because one of my first books I read about angels and astrology or whatever. So, of course, me coming by myself to these top scientists, they'd probably just think, no, thank you. But I come there with Dr. Julia Mossbridge, award-winning scientist, and it's great because it was wonderful for me to interact with and hear the thoughts of these leading minds who are researching this. Feel very blessed. I really do. Absolutely.
Let me ask you this, Theresa. To someone who's psychically blind, or someone who may be as psychic as a stone, put it that way.
Yes.
And I'm going to use, being that we're
There's a reason for that. I mean, if your unconscious mind is smart, and there's usually a reason when absolutely nothing comes up, like if you can't remember your dreams, or you don't sense anything, or you don't have anything, your mind is trying very hard to make that happen, because I think it's quite actually a natural state for us. So if it keeps happening, it might suggest something from your past, or some belief system that you need to work through, because I have also found out in my research, regular dreaming, having senses about the future, is extremely healthy. And if you just say, I don't have any of that, there is a reason. I said the unconscious mind is smart.
Okay.
And it's doing something to protect you, or because you're not quite ready yet, that you need to work up and iron out other things.
Okay.
That is interesting, because I do meet people who say to me, I never dream. And I want to shake them, and I say, you do. We have thousands and thousands and thousands of dreams. You're just not recalling them.
Now, to someone who is psychically blind, and I'm going to use the example of remote viewing versus precognition, what does it feel like, and does it feel different? Do you see pictures versus a feeling, or is it different for different people?
When you say psychically blind, do you mean that someone who doesn't see images in their mind's eye?
Someone who doesn't have these experiences at all.
Someone who doesn't have those experiences at all. As I say, first of all, I think that's happening for a reason. And I think investigating that, the first thing I would suggest if that's happening is to read as much as you can about it, because it's the law of attraction. And the more you sort of think about something, the more it starts to happen. So immerse yourself in that world, read about the paranormal, go to demonstrations, listen to talks, read weird books like the Premonition Code, because what happens then, the mind is very, very receptive. It starts picking up things, and you're more likely to have psychic experiences then. If they still don't happen, I think there is some blockage. Typically, something may have happened in your past, that the messages you got were that psychic stuff was all a load of woo and nonsense, or sinful, or something like that. That needs to be looked into as well. And also, the third thing I suggest is our website is for everybody. And I actually am, because there's some people who've gone on the website and really score very highly in the tests. And then there are people like me, because even though I do write a lot about the paranormal, I'm not what I would say a psychic. I have never claimed to be a psychic. I have my flashes and moments, but then sometimes I'm completely, square head. I have no, I'm certainly not one of those sixth sense people who can see dead people and all that. I can't. Or see the future. I'm not a clairvoyant. So, but the more you practice, the more you start improving. And regular meditation, regular dream recall, listening to your feelings. I think if you're not picking up psychically, the nearest thing you get is your feelings. Now, feelings are fascinating. Listen to them. When you come into a room, check in with your feelings. What are you feeling now? Write it down, because you can learn so much about yourself. And the more you analyze your feelings, the closer you're getting to start being psychic or sensitive, or whatever you like to call it, or precognitive. Because feelings are the pathway, and creativity as well. Being more creative. A lot of people who are very highly creative tend to have psychic experiences too. Do creative activities, art, singing, music, those kind of things, or technology as well. I mean, a lot of people in computers or designing programs, coding, that kind of thing. If you're using both sides of your brain, you're more likely to have psychic connections or psychic insights, or or precognitions, glimpses of the future. And I can tell you, when I do have that, like I have a dream, and it happens now every couple of times every month, I have a powerful dream, and a couple of days later, elements of that dream play out in my daily life, and I don't know how that happens. I find that riveting. It's like, I've been here before. I know what you're going to say. I know what you're going to do now.
I have that happen quite often too.
You could argue, of course, the skeptics say, well, it's because you know our lives are in patterns, and it's predictability, and it's what might likely to happen. But no, not always. Sometimes the things that I dream about are so weird or random, and then when they play out, and then we have stories like that in the book as well. And sometimes dreams have literally saved people's lives. Mm-hmm. We start off with a powerful story of someone who was dreaming that he was driving down a path he'd not seen before. He saw a church, and a deer came out in the road. It slammed on his brakes, and he woke up. And then a few days later, he was driving down that road, and it had exactly the same experience, and it literally saved his life because there was a police car coming the way. But he's been there before, and it was an area he'd never been to before. But because he recognized the church that he saw from his dreams, he was able to take action, which stopped disaster from happening. And this person admitted to me when they get in touch, because a lot of people write to me after read the book saying, look, I don't typically believe in this kind of business, but this happened to me and I can't explain it. What are your thoughts? Am I going mad? Is what people say. But, I love those kind of stories. And also on the Precognition, the Premonition.com website, we have a way for people to record when they think they've had a premonition, because one of the things is hindsight. People can say, well, you're telling me now that you sensed this was going to happen, but where's the proof? And we're hoping that this website will also be a way for people to accurately record, so that we have a document of it.
Okay. I'm curious, you brought something up just a few moments ago, and it stirred something in me that you were talking about the types of people who tend to be more intuitive, and I'm curious if you're I want to say co-conspirator on the book, if Dr. Mossbridge has psychic tendencies.
She definitely has, and she's actually she's amazing. She's almost like in oracles in ancient Greece where they would have dreams. She's like that. She actually, people will ask her a question, and then she will say, I will dream on it. And then she will give an answer the following morning, how her dream has answered a question or a dilemma. And she actually did an offer for this for the book, if people pre-ordered the book. I couldn't do it. To send her a question, and she would have a dream, and that dream would provide the answer. I find that, and she's been so accurate as well. Really? Sometimes now she's taken it even a step further. She says, I don't want to know your question. I'm just going to dream for you and then give you my thoughts from the dream where it's at. And she has so many testimonials of people. And she does this just as a vocation, not for income, etc. But she says to me, look, I'm going to sleep anyway, so I may as well maximize the time. Because for her, it's all research. She dreams several times a night, and I call her the oracle, because she when she has to do a big decision, she says, I'm going to dream on it. And the dream is how she answers it. Now, that's very interesting when you've got a leading scientist doing that. Isn't that exciting? I just find that exciting.
That is.
That's me.
Well, from a scientific standpoint, how does she explain that?
You're going to have her on the show.
I will.
She's a really, really good. You'll find her absolutely riveting. And she has another life as well, in that she's researching AI, artificial intelligence, and how to make artificial intelligence more loving. It's called lovingai.com, and this robot, Sophia. I don't know if you heard of it.
Can I stop you real quick here, Teresa? We have this running joke here on the show, and when we do our supernatural news segment, I have this running joke with Dave where we have this bet going as to how the world's going to end. I say it's going to be by AI, and Dave says it's going to be by a zombie apocalypse. And we're betting up
AI. I'm with you on AI.
Yeah, and we're betting a box of Twinkies over it. So,
well, what Julia's developing actually with Loving AI is robots who can love you unconditionally. I mean, not in the physical sense, but in the emotional sense. Oh. And she programs them. I mean, you will find this so. I mean, that is so fascinating. And as I said, their robot Sophia is incredibly lifelike, and that is another story. So she has another world there that she's now into in AI, but she brings her spiritual perspective into all her work and her scientific perspective. Very, very interesting lady. And a scientist of the future, and this is the basis of our book as well, because, it's the Minority Report, the precogs, but not precogs who live in a pool and have no lives and are unhappy. We call them positive precogs. We're hoping that when people read the book and experience the website, that they will begin their journey to become a positive precog, able to sense their future and to make decisions about their future to lead a more positive life for themselves and the planet. It's all about living more positively and feeling more connected to other people, because we have this exercise in there where you have a handshake with your future self, and both of you commit to doing the best that you can for yourself and for other people. I know that sounds weird, but I do believe that we have lots of selves, don't we? We have our past self, our present self, our future self. And what it is, it's showing that time is a circle. And if all those selves can be in harmony and look out for each other, make a commitment to your future self, shake hands with your future self. And I know that sounds odd, but it is a very powerful exercise that you can do, that you're going to meet your future self and shake hands.
That sounds...
You've gone quiet there.
No, that sounds wonderful, and it sounds very utopian. But what I'm going to do here is I want to take a quick break, and then when I come back, I want to turn it on its ear here, Theresa, and I want to throw a little rain on your parade here and ask you a different question.
I'm used to that, honestly.
Okay. When we come back, we'll ask Theresa the flip side of that question. Welcome back to the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Beyond the Darkness. I'm Tim Dennis in for Dave Schrader. Theresa Cheung is our guest. The name of the book is The Premonition Code, The Science of Precognition, How Sensing the Future Can Change Your Life. It's available right now on Amazon.com and Barnes & Noble. Theresa wrote this book along with Julia Mossbridge, Ph.D., Director of the Innovation Lab at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, or IONS. And they've also got a website out there, thepremonitioncode.com, where you can actually go there and test your premonition ability. And before the break, Theresa was saying eventually the idea is that you get your premonition up to speed, that you can eventually shake hands with your future self, that all will be one, Theresa, all will be in harmony, all will be hunky-dory.
No, yeah, although, what if...
What happens? Are you ready for this?
Yes.
What happens if you take that journey down that road, you use your precognitive abilities, your premonition,
don't like what you see,
and you see something terrible?
Exactly. Well, this is an opportunity for you to make a choice, because the future, if you study the physics of time, the future is fixed, but it's also a series of probabilities. We do have free will and choice. I believe that. And if you do see something in your future that you do not like, you have the opportunity to change it.
Now, okay, but let me bring you, I'm going to bring a story to you here, just a brief one. And you tell me, and it does involve a psychic. It involves a friend of ours, Chris Fleming. Who's been on many a TV show, Psychic Kids being one of them here in the States, and he's been on a few TV shows over in England. He's on one right now over in England.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I think is it My House is Haunted, or I don't remember what the name of the show is. It's in conjunction with Zach Bagans and his production company.
Excellent.
Chris is a very talented psychic. Was it 8 years ago now? Now, I have a condition called Charcot-Foot. Our listeners are familiar with it. It's a diabetic condition. My leg bone went through my ankle and my foot. It's very messy. And I've had complications with it for about 4 or 5 years now. About 8 years ago, we're in Philadelphia. Maybe 8, 9 years ago now, we're in Philadelphia. And he's really, I get off the elevator. We're at the elevator. We were doing a trip of Eastern State Penitentiary, and we used to do these big trips where we would either with the Ghost Hunters guys or the Ghost Adventures guys, and we would take up to 200 people to different haunted locations, and we'd investigate, and we'd do different seminars during the day and whatnot. And I'm passing Chris as I get out of the elevator, and he's just pissed off, and he grabs me by the shirt and slams me against the wall, and he says, "God damn you." And I was like, What did I do? And he said, "I was up half the night because I had this dream about you." And I was like, "Oh, hey, Tiger, easy." And he said, "No," he goes, "I had this dream that you were in a hospital bed and you were missing your right leg."
Yep.
That's the leg that I have issues with today. And he said, It was from your diabetes, and it was because your diabetes was uncontrolled, and which it isn't. It's under control today, and it has been for quite a while. But this condition, Charcot-foot, happens. It's rare. It's a rare diabetic condition. It happens whether your sugars are under control or not. And he said, I had this dream, and your foot was just breaking down. There was nothing you could do, and you were in this hospital bed, and I just saw you were miserable, and you were losing your foot, and there's nothing I could do, and there's nothing anybody could do, and it was miserable, and you need to start taking better care of yourself. And he's just mad at me, but at the same time, there's a tear forming in his eye.
Okay.
And I'm thinking, geez, he's just physically shook. Now I'm shook at this point.
But he's seen a potential future. You believe that, there are many, many futures and probabilities. And his advice to you probably made you take extra care of yourself for fear of that future happening.
It was definitely one of the things that
it would have
got me
if somebody says that to you, you are going to be extra vigilant. So what a good friend he's got. He has glimpsed a future where you have not paid attention or taken enough care of yourself or your medication on time or whatever, and he wanted to give you a powerful message. If you don't be vigilant, this is what I see. He probably did see a future, a potential future, if you'd made a different choices. That's my perspective anyway.
What really scared me is when the Charcot-foot first happened, and I thought, geez, Chris's dream is coming true.
But you were able to be forewarned, and able to make the conscious decision to take extra care of yourself, because there could be dire consequences if you didn't.
Right.
You'd be extra vigilant.
Right. But in that, it still seems like that road is still traveled, and I'm not putting anything negative out there. I've always maintained a positive attitude about it, and that I've kept telling myself I'm keeping my foot. There's no other alternative.
Of course you are. You are making that decision now to do everything you can. Because imagine if you hadn't had that warning, you might have done something unconsciously without realizing it that could have increased the risk of it happening.
But in that,
because I had that recently. A friend of mine, I had a dream that they were very ill too, not losing a limb, but literally close to the edge in hospital. And I spoke to them about it, and I said, I remember this was about 6 months ago, and I said, I'm really sorry to say this. I don't want to panic you or something, but I had this awful dream. And they said, I've been having a few headaches. And then they suddenly realized they had not been taking their blood pressure medication for months. Ooh. They went to the doctor. Their blood pressure was through the roof because they'd forgotten to take their medication for the last 3 months. Ooh. Because they'd had a lot of house renovations on, and they'd been busy, and they'd lost a lot of weight, actually, because blood pressure sometimes has to do with weight. Mm-hmm. And they felt that they didn't know that they were not taking it, but they thought they were absolutely fine. But basically, they were so close to a heart attack. Now, I'm wondering if I hadn't expressed to this person what I'd seen in my dream, And then they thought, well, I have been having a few headaches. And I was saying, please go to the doctor. Please, this dream really panicked me. I woke up sweating and nervous. And then to have their blood pressure taken and it to be through the roof. And you know, if they'd continued not taking their medication, because they decided not to take their medication against medical advice. They hadn't gone to the, I mean, if you're on medication, you're on medication for a reason.
Right.
You don't diagnose yourself. You know, they had read lots of books about, you know, eating properly for high blood pressure and everything. They felt that they were fine. But anyway, I'm sorry, that's just going on a tangent. But
I get what you're saying there. But I guess my question at the end of this is, even though you've started down that road, the fact of the matter is, it seems like part of this is just plain fate. The other part of it, it seems like we have very little control over steering that process of fate. Like you're headed down that road no matter what. But you can veer a little bit left or right, but it seems like you're still going to go down that road. So
I think of it more as our lives are a series of. I mean, there is this wonderful theory that there's so many alternative universes, and maybe in another universe that has happened to you. I don't know, but I think there are loads and loads of possible, probable futures. And if you look at the physics of time, that is a very powerful theory, that there are lots of possible, probable futures, and you are now choosing to go down another future which avoids that.
Okay.
I don't believe that certain things are it's strange. Things are destined to happen, but we also have the ability to change that happening. It goes. I mean, if you ever studied Romeo and Juliet, when it's all written in the stars that Romeo and Juliet are going to die young, but if you actually read the play, there are so many opportunities for them to make different choices to avoid that fate.
But does that?
There are. I mean, if anyone studied at school, you'll be thinking, why did they do that? Stupid choice, you know. And it's the same with you. If you just take care of your health. Mm-hmm. and are positive and it will not happen. But if you worry that it's going to happen, it would maybe increase the likelihood of it.
I'll throw you down the rabbit hole a little bit here, though, in that there's a belief that before you come into this life, you write your own contract, your soul contract, and that you'll put up with a certain amount of.
There's the key. So you write it, so you can rewrite it.
Do you think so after you've been here?
Yes, I think you do. I think every moment we make choices, and sometimes the choices we think are so insignificant can change lives completely. Sometimes just being 5 minutes late to something means that on the way you bump into someone who changes the course of your life, or that you avoid an accident. If you guys think it's a wonderful way to look at life, that every decision you make, from the time you get up to how you use your time during the day, could completely change your future. I mean, I'm sure you've heard these wonderful stories. I missed a train, and it was the best thing that happened to me because I bumped into someone who suggested something, and then it led to this, that, and the other. However, it's that wonderful movie Sliding Doors, isn't it?
Yeah.
Every decision we make is not trivial. We think it is, but every decision we make is very powerful in the network of the wonderful correlations of our lives.
Well, don't get me wrong. I get those decisions in influencing different areas of your life, but I'm talking like the overall scope. Like for example, before you come into this life, if you were to make, let's say you made a contract with yourself. Okay. In order to pay for, and I'm getting large scope, and I know it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other, and we're arguing apples and oranges here. But let's say, I'll use myself as an example. Okay, in order to pay for, let's say, whatever I did in a past life. Let's say I was Blackbeard the pirate in a past life, and in order to I have to put up with a peg leg in this life for the stuff I did in a past life. All right. So here we go. I got to suffer with a bad leg because I did really bad stuff in a past life. So I can't do anything about that. I made that contract that, you know what, I got to put up with the bum leg because I did that stuff in a past life. There's nothing I can do about it. I can stave it off as much as I can try, but ultimately,
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, ultimately, that's my fate.
But if you learn to have empathy and understanding, then you've learned your life lesson, as it were. You will learn your life lesson, and you will be able to make the most of your life with your bad leg, and see that actually having a bad leg does not determine whether you have a rewarding, fulfilling life. It's not. I mean, you could say, like with Stephen Hawking, for example, he lost everything, but he still had the most amazing life.
Very true.
So he had to maybe learn something to the loss of all his physical abilities. I don't know what that is. I mean, everybody's, but he could have made the decision to just give up.
True. Very true.
But he didn't.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
And in fact, probably I actually think that physical suffering sometimes can propel people to most extraordinary to do things that they wouldn't. Because maybe if your leg wasn't bad, you wouldn't be doing half of what you're doing.
I actually think that physical pain, and a lot of people may think this is kind of woo-woo too, but physical pain actually is inheritive of soul growth on this plane.
Oh yes, it's a catalyst, it's a breakthrough. It's a trauma that helps you evolve and climb up the ladder, as it were, in your evolution, your spiritual evolution.
Yeah.
Sometimes people need it, and that's why I think actually, in young girls, I see a lot of young girls with self-harming today and eating disorders and all that. In a way, it's because a lot of them are doing this to themselves because they want to grow and they don't know how, because their whole lives are defined by social media and things that aren't important. So I sometimes think that these addictive diseases and problems, addictions, are a spiritual hunger. That I haven't got a physical problem, so I'm going to kind of like have this problem so that I grow. If you're trying to understand what I'm trying to say here. Sometimes people, if there's not enough going on in their life which is making them feel that they seek meaning, that they will seek it in other ways through addictive behavior or whatever, and it's a way to force them to grow. I think very much of addiction as a spiritual hunger, a need for meaning.
Yeah, it's a great way of looking at it, actually. Speaking of, let me ask you this, and kind of I don't want to say misinterpretation, because that's not what I want to throw it out as, but a lot of times we misinterpret one thing for another, like you were saying, addiction for hunger for wanting something else.
Hunger for meaning for me.
Right, hunger for meaning. Let me ask you this. A lot of times we can even misinterpret signals in our own body.
Yes.
And one of the things I find too is when I might get a heightened sense of I don't want to say fear, anxiety, or maybe that trouble is coming around the corner, and maybe I'm over exaggerating. Maybe I'm just in a heightened state of awareness. Maybe it's not precognitive at all. Maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm just.
It's the difference between precognition and fear.
Exactly. Yeah. What is it?
There is a difference. There is a difference, and that's something that I've struggled. And also, difference between precognition and wishful thinking.
Right.
That's the same thing. How can you tell the difference between really wanting something to happen, or fearing something's going to happen, and genuine precognition? There are ways of knowing. First of all, when it comes to fear, the voices or the images you see will typically be frightening and cause alarm and be very self-critical. That is not precognition or spiritual or anything, because precognition will never make you feel less than. Precognition is empowering. So if you are having anxiety and feelings of dread and you don't want to take action, it is not precognition. And if you're having anxiety and feelings of dread, and you instantly know what to do, that is precognition. If you see what I'm trying to say here.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
That precognition will typically lead you to taking action that you just know is right. If, however, you're having anxiety and dread and it freezes you like a rabbit caught in the headlights, it is not precognition. It is fear and ego and anxiety all eating you up. You know, these very human negative voices we have in our head, which are the enemy of psychic development. So if it leads you to action, positive action, it's precognition. But if it leads you to being stuck, I don't know what to do, I'm panicking, I'm rubbish, I'm a failure, that is not precognition. That is anxiety.
Okay. Now, how about when there's a big jackpot out there with the Powerball and or with the lottery?
Yeah, everybody says, why can't I Well, people have.
And Theresa,
we have had letters from people who have dreamt the lottery numbers. Typically, they've dreamt them and not entered the lottery, which is annoying. But they have, that must have been the most frustrating thing, that people had a dream that they won the lottery and there were several numbers and they didn't pay any attention, and then actually the numbers came up. That happened. Can you imagine?
Every time I go to the store, I see myself winning this thing. I can see my lifestyle. I can see everything changing. I visualize it. I do everything you see in The Secret. I can see it all happening as clear as day, yet I buy my ticket and I'm still as broke as I was the day before.
I know. I wish precognition we could all dream up the
So how come
lottery. I know.
How come I can't make it happen?
But then again, you see, that's all in the realm of thought, that you're visualizing, you're dreaming it. And I think The Secret is fantastic, but it's only one half of the puzzle. The second half is actions. Positive actions. And I think there's been too much emphasis in the New Age movement on affirmations, on meditation, on dreaming, hoping, praying, and not enough on what are you actually doing. Because we all know these people who make a lot of promises, say a lot of things, but don't actually take action. The famous statement, judge a person by what they do, not what they say. And I think the universe is the same. It's looking at what are you doing, not what are you thinking, praying and dreaming. What are you actually doing to bring the success that you want? And I think there needs to be more emphasis on actions rather than dreaming, hoping, casting spells or whatever in the New Age movement. And that's another thing I've been trying to do. I've written a series of books about rituals, powerful rituals you can do that will signal to the universe that you are viable, that and we've all met these people, as I say, who are all talk and no action. Okay. You don't really want those people in your life after a while. And what if the universe is the same and it's just looking at us and say, oh, here they go again, meditating, having a visualization. What are they actually going to do so I can actually put my energy behind them, put my trust? So I have written a series of books about rituals that can signal to the universe you are actually now a person of action, because rituals are about actions. Because I think we are what we repeatedly do, not what we repeatedly think. Because a lot of people think if they have negative thoughts that they're going to create, like it's some magical thing, that they're going to draw all these negative things to them. Right. And yeah, there's an element of truth in that, but I think we put far too much emphasis on that. We need to put emphasis on what do you repeatedly do? Look at your day. What do you repeatedly do? Because I think that's how the law of attraction really works, our actions, not our thoughts.
So it's more the action bringing the negative on.
Yeah, I truly believe that. And okay. I think there's actually been a study to show that rituals are effective and can actually boost performance. And you don't actually have to believe in the ritual for it to work. The very fact that you do it, it's an action. It's like tennis players, they bounce the ball before they hit a serve. That's a ritual. There's actually no reason for them to do that. It helps their concentration. It's a ritual. It's an action they do. And the studies are showing you don't actually have to believe in the ritual that you do for it to work. And that's really interesting. That's another topic of conversation. But I think much more on actions and less emphasis on the thoughts. Let's take action to show the universe that we're viable, that we're worth helping, that we're worth,
Right.
I think the universe must be so fed up of all us dreamers and hopers and wishers. That doesn't do anything, does it? I mean, if somebody says they're praying for you, yes, it's lovely, but wouldn't it be rather nice if they gave you a hug? That's a positive action.
Yeah, that would be. Well, you bring up another interesting, and we do prayer requests online for people, and we have seen some amazing things happen with prayer requests. But I do have to ask you this too, with the power of prayer and. Are you?
There's an element of truth to that. I mean, studies do show that patients who are prayed for tend to recover faster than patients who are not. But that suggests to me that the patients who are prayed for, they have more people in their lives who care about them, maybe, and that's very powerful to know that you're loved and cared for. And there all is something. I mean, willpower can move mountains. If you can dream it, you can do it. I do believe in that as well. But as I said, it's half the equation. I think we spend all our time focusing on that half and not enough on the other equally important half, positive actions.
Is it fair to say that the person who's being prayed for that's ill will probably get better quicker if they're also praying for themselves?
Oh, gosh, yeah. And that's another huge topic. I think that the greatest love of all is the love you have for yourself. And sadly, that's what most people struggle with in their spiritual development and psychic development as well. You have to start with a foundation of self-love, but so many people don't know how to love themselves. It's every religion, every spiritual movement, psychic development movement talks about self-love, but nobody tells us how to do it, especially if you were brought up in an abusive household or you've had terrible things happening in your life. How do you love yourself? There's no sort of guidelines there, are there?
No, none.
It's something that nobody teaches us, and I think that's another thing for the future that should be taught in schools. We need to know how to love ourselves properly, and one vital part of loving yourself is the spiritual. Pay attention to the spiritual, the part that is not material, not physical. That is very important part of self-love. But, it is something that people do really struggle with. And all the letters I get, 90%, the issue is when people are feeling down, you're trying to find in someone else or in something what you need, first of all, to give to yourself. You're expecting other people to give you what you, first of all, need to give yourself. And we've all been guilty of that we look to other people, or we look to a career, or we look to anything to give us what we need to find ourselves. And that's where, you get Tibetan monks or whatever, people who've renounced the world because they don't need the world to give them that. And if you've met these monks, which I have the privilege, they are so joyful, and yet they have nothing. They've renounced everything because they've learned that they are a source of love to themselves, and they're not seeking it outside themselves. And that is the ultimate, I think. And once you are able to love yourself, I think then you can move on to all the other things. And the trouble is, we all skip that step of self-love, and we think, well, I'm going to try and find my love for myself through someone else, or through a career, or through doing this, or being famous, or getting loads of likes on Facebook. It won't work without that foundation of self-love.
And that kind of brings us back to the emptiness we were talking about earlier in the program. Yeah.
Emptiness is lack of self-love. It is, and it's the hardest thing. People don't love themselves enough, and it's so very, very sad. And it sounds like all very narcissistic or selfish to love yourself. It's not. There's a reason in the plane why they say put on your own oxygen mask before putting on someone else's. Because a lot of people, especially in the spiritual movement, are walking around without oxygen, trying to help other people.
Yeah. Yeah, very true. Very true. So let me ask you this, Theresa. Through this book and through this website, what are we hoping to accomplish? What are we hoping to bring together with the Premonition Code?
What I'm hoping to accomplish is to bring some credibility to a movement that I'm passionate about, the paranormal movement and psychic abilities, all this thing that has been so long ridiculed, often for good reason, because as I said, there is a lot of fraud in it, is to bring some credibility to it. To try and have an answer to the Randy challenge, a credible answer where I'm working with scientists, something that I can present to people and say, here, we are trying to do something to bring scientific validation and testing into this field. That's what I'm trying to do. It's all part of my mission, which is to make the spirituality and the paranormal normal. I dream of a day when paranormal abilities are just regarded as something normal. The sixth sense is just another one sense that we all have, and this is all part of that.
Now, would it be beyond reason? Because I believe they shut down the Randy challenge. I don't believe it's
yes, it has. I think it is now. It's no longer because nobody won it, though. I mean, and that's a great thing that skeptics come and say, well, yeah, if it's real, why didn't anyone win it? It's $1 million. Who wouldn't want to win that?
I can tell you why. I think it mainly it's not so much because of the new director. The new director, I think, was actually more open than James was himself.
Okay,
but I think I think James was more of a cynic, to be honest with you. I think it's not that the money wasn't there. The money was there. James Mr. Randy proved that the money was there. It wasn't that. I really do believe that it was more of a cynical take on the paranormal, and that's just what it was. I think Mr. Randy took a lot of liberties of being so cynical that in finding so many different, or trying to find so many different holes in the paranormal, that he didn't have his eyes open enough to try and find what could have been possible there. He was trying to find.
Have you interviewed his nemesis, Uri Geller?
We have not had Uri Geller on the show. No, we've reached out to him many times, but he has not wanted to come on the program. No.
Okay. It's interesting because he is a friend of mine, actually. I've interviewed him. Yes, he's a lovely, lovely man. He's living in Israel now.
We would love to have him on. We've reached out to him probably 3 or 4 times throughout the years. We've been on the air for 13 years now, and he's not wanted to come on. So. Okay,
well, I do know him. I will ask.
Please but, do.
I think he's just fed up, really, of the hounding. And he, of course, him and James Randi, fascinating, the dynamic there. Yeah,
it is. We actually had, and this was before Lou Gentili passed away. Lou Gentili had gone after James Randi with a passion. We replayed the show a few times here. And it was before Lou passed away, and the two of them went at each other tooth and nail. And Lou was an EVP specialist. And claimed he could produce EVP on demand. James claimed that Lou was dodging him, and Lou claimed that he kept coming after James, and unfortunately, Lou had passed away before they actually got to the challenge.
Okay.
But but this was back, was it 2006, 2007, I think is what it was. That was an interesting series of shows. Probably one of the most interesting series of shows I've ever heard. But it was in that you could tell where the line was drawn. In that Mr. Randy his cynical side definitely came out, and in that Lou, his paranormal side definitely came out. And in that I can prove it, but in that Lou didn't show the science, it was just, I can show you. Well, okay, you can show him, but he's going to want to see it for himself. And in that, he's going to set it up in his environment with his people. And that's the key. And that's what
he's not a scientist. As much as I respect James Randi, he's not a scientist.
Right.
And you need the objectivity of a scientist. A scientist who is able to say, well, if the results are not where my personal preference is, I'm still recording it. And that's what I hope that I'm working with now, that they are scientists before they are believers or non-believers.
So let me ask you this.
Otherwise they get struck off. They get a very bad name. You can't, as a scientist, skew the results. You can't. As I said, Dr. Julia Mossbridge, published by the American Psychological Association, she simply cannot allow her. Because I'm Dr. Julia, of course, is a believer in precognition. I'd be dishonest if I said she wasn't, but she cannot allow that to interfere. She, first of all, her living, she earns her living as a scientist, a neuroscientist, and lecturer. That's who she is. So those are the people, I think, who should be studying it. And Dr. Sam Parnier, who's studying near-death experiences, he does not believe in life after death. But he's proved so far that 3 minutes after death, the brain, when the brain is dead and the heart stopped beating and there is no sign of life, 3 minutes after death, people are having memories and awareness of what was going on in the room. So something is still conscious when all the equipment is saying this person's gone. So there's more ongoing research with Dr. Sam Parnier. I'd love to talk to him. I haven't had an opportunity to, but he doesn't actually believe in life after death, but he pioneered resuscitation techniques, but people kept coming back with these near-death experience stories, and it was, again, all that data. He wanted to research it, and his research is getting so many people excited about the possibility of life after death, because you've got it run by someone who doesn't actually believe in life after death. You've also got to remember another fascinating thing about resuscitation techniques is that, 50 or 60 years ago, these people would have died taking those stories of life after death with them.
Right.
But now the reason we hear so much about near-death experiences is because resuscitation techniques are bringing people back from the brink. And that's why it's worth studying, because there are thousands of them all over the world. And as I said, Dr. Sam Parnier's research is all over the world. It's global. He just found it, he's one of the leading pioneers in resuscitation techniques, and he just found it fascinating that so many people were coming back with these stories. And I've heard now from surgeons and people who've written to me that they're almost blasé about it, that people come back with these striking stories of what they've seen happening in the hospital, or they've gone to another realm and met relatives and deceased people and come back with these incredible stories. And a lot of them did not believe before. How do you, anyway, fascinating.
It is very fascinating. And I guess my follow-up question would be this, getting back to the James Randi Foundation.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. It would be this. Once you, and I know there's got to be an endpoint to your collection of data, especially off the website and the testing that you're doing. Would you be interested at the end of all this to take this information and bring it to the current head of JREF, even though there's no money involved now?
Yes, of course, and Julia would. Yes, of course. I mean, there's no point me doing it. As I said, me doing it, I'm not a scientist. It needs to be done by scientists. It needs to come to them with the research. Yes, that would be a dream.
I mean,
and I hope, because of enough people have to do the test, because at the end of each section of the book there are quizzes. And then we enter into the controlled precognition, where we're basically asking readers to do remote viewing as it would have been done, as it's done under scientific conditions. And there's no way that you will be able to predict, to know the image that's going to come up without precognitive ability.
And I believe it was DJ.
The people who score higher than chance will enter our Hall of Fame. And be taken further and further, and we want to study these people.
I believe it's DJ Grossi who's the head of JREF now, and I may be wrong about that, but eventually just saying, listen, we know there's no money involved in this, that the challenge is not there, but DJ at one time, even openly on Facebook, was saying, I just want to see some evidence of it, and it was much more open, I think, than Mr. Randi ever was.
No, I hope this is what we hope to do. We hope to provide that evidence. It's very ambitious. May not happen. We may not be able to identify anyone or find that evidence, but we are going to try. I want to try. And in the process, though, I hope that I will show my readers, as I said, I've been writing about this from an anecdotal perspective, a belief perspective for many years. And I want to give my readers something to show that there is scientific research proving that your experiences that you write to me about have scientific validation. That what happened, what you saw in that dream or that vision you had, look, there's genuine science showing that it's real. Because I say a lot of people write to me thinking they're going nuts, or it's something strange or odd, or that they want to know what happened to them. Is it real? And I often write back and say, well, from my perspective, I believe what you experienced is real, and you're not hallucinating, you're not mad. But this time I can maybe offer them a bit more and show some solid, hardcore evidence. As I said, very ambitious, but Dr. Julia and I are ambitious, and we're hoping to lead the way. As I said, it's also quite hard because we are both two women in a movement. The parapsychology community tends to be very male-dominated. Mm-hmm. So what we're doing, it's tough. It's tough for us because if you go to parapsychology conferences, there are a lot of guys there. And skeptics as well, and we are two women coming forward with this website and this vision for the future of trying to bring credibility to the paranormal. So, we've taken on a lot, but we're up for it. We're both at a stage in our lives when we welcome the challenge. Well, we want to move our. Julia wants to move her research forward. I want to move my writing forward. Because I can keep on. I'm very blessed. I get books. Afterlife story collections. I've done near-death experience story collections. I could keep on writing those. Mm-hmm. But how is that going to progress things? Right. It's the same old, and it's preaching to the converted. I'm trying to preach to the unconverted about this. Right.
Well, and I believe that you are taking the next step, and so is Dr. Mossbridge. And I believe you'll have a lot more support than you could ever imagine out there for this. This is long overdue.
We got said, in the front of the book, you look at the, Deepak Chopra, Steve Taylor, James Van Praagh, Mark Whitman, Caroline White, Jim Harold. All these people gave these lovely endorsements for the book. Yep. They understood what we're trying to do here.
Yeah. And you'll find this huge groundswell of support for it. Like I said, it's long overdue, and you're the
even if there's no groundswell of support, the important thing is it's striking out in a new direction, and I'm doing that now in my career. I mean, one of my recent efforts, I teamed up with the Church of Jediism, the Jedi Knights, because I believe that the Force is spirituality. I'm trying to stop us all talking to the same people all the time, the converted. Because we all sort of affirm each other, and I'm trying to, like with working with the Church of Jediism, was to try and make it more mainstream. Go to sci-fi fans, talk to them about spirituality. And the same. I'm now talking to scientists, a different community, each time, trying to make it more mainstream. That's what I'm trying to do.
Very cool. Very cool. The name of the book is The Premonition Code, The Science of Precognition, How Sensing the Future Can Change Your Life. It's available on Amazon.com and available on Barnes & Noble. Also, you have an event coming up, Theresa, that I know you wanted to plug as well.
What was that? Sorry, do I? I have lots of talk. I have talks and things, but that's the UK, so there's no point.
October 20th I have down here. You will be, let me see here, October 20th. I have it right here. Hold on. Alexandra Palace.
Oh, yes, of course. Oh, yeah. Yes, it's the mind, body and soul. But again, that is wonderful, and I'm very blessed, and it's a beautiful setting to talk, very prestigious and everything. But again, people who come to a mind, body and soul convention are going to be the converted. I'm much more excited to talk to science conferences or university students, if you see what I mean. I'd love to go back to my to my university, Cambridge, and talk to the students there, because they would hurl criticism at me, but that's actually what I want at the moment. I want to talk to people who are not already predisposed to believe. I'd like to try and open minds, because that is the only way I think that the paranormal community can move forward and break new ground. Stop going around in circles and talking to all people who agree. I don't want necessarily to keep agreeing with me. I do love it to be challenged. If you see what I mean, to preach to the unconverted about all this.
Okay. Also, TheresaCheung.com, and the important one, the PremonitionCode.com. Be sure to check it out. Take the tests there and test your premonition there and help.
And don't worry if you don't do too well in the test. It's practice.
Okay.
If you're learning a musical instrument, you can't expect to play a symphony on day one. You know, you have to do your scales and put in the time. And it's the same with precognition. It's the same like anything in life. It's practice. Well, daily practice and daily thinking about it. And then you'll get better and better and better. And some people are naturally gifted, just like some people have natural musical ability and will be able to, even they still need to practice.
Very true. And more importantly, help you and Dr. Mossbridge out as well with
yes,
your
please.
research.
And it's entirely free. There's no payment required. The website is entirely free, as these things should be.
There you go. So be sure to check that out as well. Check out those websites. We'll put the links in the description of this show, so it's nice and easy to find. So you can go there and take the tests over and over again and make sure that you get your premonition on point as well. Theresa, thank you very much for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right. And folks, be sure to remember that I'll be with you again next weekend as Dave is off to Romania next weekend. Be sure to check out darknessevents.com for anywhere you want to check out where Dave and I are around the country, around the world. We've got plenty of events coming up as the fall is happening. Of course, Chris Jericho's Rock and Wrestling Rager Cruise is coming up. ChrisJerichoCruise.com is where Dave and I will both be. We'll be setting sail on a cruise ship heading out to the Bermuda Triangle. Yes, that's right. We're going from Miami to the Bahamas. And there's rock and roll, there's wrestling, there's paranormal, and we're going to call up a USO out of the Bermuda Triangle while we're on that cruise ship. You can join us. There's less than 100 cabins available. ChrisJerichoCruise.com. Be sure to check that out as well. For Dave Schrader, I'm Tim Dennis. Join us again next weekend for the best in paranormal talk radio. This has been Beyond the Darkness.